Welcome to today's deep dive. If you've been staring at your feeds lately,
Which I'm sure you have.
right, watching this seemingly endless flood of breaking news alerts,
It's a lot.
it really is. And if you're feeling completely overwhelmed by the sheer scale of it all, trust me, you are in the exact right place.
Yeah, this deep dive is custom built for you.
Our mission today is clear, but it is incredibly heavy. We are unpacking a massive, fast-moving geopolitical earthquake.
Put it mildly.
Right. We are looking at the events of March 1st, 2026. Specifically, coordinated U.S. and Israel strikes on Iran.
The strikes that resulted in the death of Iran's supreme leader.
Yes, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. We're going to sort through the precise timeline of how this unfolded, the massive retaliation that immediately followed, and the global ripple effects.
Ripple effects that are quite literally reshaping the world as we speak.
Before we go any further, though, I need to address you, the listener, directly.
This is really important.
It is. The source materials we have in front of us cover highly charged political and military actions.
We are talking about the strategic defense decisions of the U.S. Trump administration, Israeli military operations, and Iran's state responses.
Exactly. And I want to
Weapons away,
emphasize as
ghosts
clearly
clear.
as possible, we are not taking any sides here.
None at all.
We are not endorsing any of the viewpoints, military doctrines, or political platforms mentioned in these intelligence readouts. Our sole job today is to impartially report facts exactly as they're laid out.
So that you can fully understand the landscape of this crisis.
Just the facts, without the spin.
And, the stakes here really cannot be overstated.
Yeah.
When you look at the historical context provided in the regional analyses, they describe this specific weekend as the most dangerous Middle East crisis since the 1973 Arab-Israeli War.
That's a massive comparison.
It is, because what we're looking at is the most direct, overt, great power intervention in Iranian territory since the 1979 revolution.
So this isn't just another flare-up.
No, not at all. This is a paradigm-shifting event. It redraws decades of established geopolitical boundaries literally overnight.
Okay, let's unpack this timeline, because the sheer speed of this operation is staggering.
It happens so fast.
The strikes began late Friday, February 28, and they just continued relentlessly into the early hours of Sunday, March 1st.
Yeah.
The operational readouts detail the military hardware utilized, and it's formidable. We're talking about U.S. B-2 stealth bombers.
And Israeli F-35s.
Right, delivering highly precision-guided munitions. What does that specific combination of hardware actually tell us?
Well, what's fascinating here is the level of coordination required to pull that off. And it perfectly aligns with the selection of the targets. The intelligence briefings indicate these airstrikes were aimed at multiple, highly fortified layers of the Iranian state.
They hit leadership compounds, right?
Leadership compounds and major military infrastructure, specifically the Islamic Revolutionary Guard.
The IRGC.
Exactly. But crucially, they also went after the enriched nuclear facilities.
Not Duns and Fordo.
Yes. The enrichment facilities there were directly struck. You use B-2 bombers because they have the payload capacity to deploy massive bunker-busting munitions.
Munitions designed to penetrate deep underground facilities.
Like Fordo. And the precision of this overall operation was just absolute.
Because they knew exactly
Weapons
where
away,
he
ghosts
was.
clear.
The reports confirm these strikes occurred during a very specific narrow window when Ayatollah Khamenei was meeting with his inner circle.
Wow.
The coalition forces knew exactly where he was, and they struck that exact location.
So what does this all mean for the immediate aftermath? I mean, the briefings note that the U.S. describes this operation as a decapitation strike.
Right, taking off the head.
The stated goal was to permanently end the regime's threats by taking out its highest level of leadership.
And dismantling its nuclear capabilities in one fell swoop.
But taking out leadership and hitting deep underground bunkers, that isn't a surgical, victimless process.
No, not at all.
The human cost here is severe. Iranian state media and initial local reports claim that hundreds were killed in these initial strikes.
Civilian casualties are likely exceeding 500 people.
I'm looking at these numbers, and I have to ask, wait, didn't they know the collateral damage would be this high?
They almost certainly factored it into the strategic calculus. But the physical reality on the ground right now is incredibly murky.
Why is that?
Because there's a widespread state-level communication blackout.
Ah, so making independent verification nearly impossible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But to understand why this trust was pulled, despite the known risks of massive casualties, we have to look at the diplomatic timeline.
Right, because this didn't just happen out of nowhere.
No.
The documents point out that just a few days prior to the strike, 2025 to 2026 U.S.-Iran nuclear negotiations completely collapse.
Precisely. If we connect this to the bigger picture, those talks concluded on February 26 without an agreement.
Just days before.
Yeah, the diplomatic readouts show that the Trump administration brought incredibly firm, non-negotiable demands to the table.
What were those demands?
The complete, verifiable dismantlement of Iran's nuclear program and a total cessation of all proxy military activities across the entire Middle East.
And Tehran flatly rejected those demands.
Completely. In response, the U.S. cited ongoing Iranian violations of their previous nuclear commitments.
Combined with the continuous proxy attacks on U.S. interests.
Yes, they used that as the direct justification for initiating these military strikes. The diplomatic window didn't just close.
It slammed shut.
And the military window violently opened.
And the reaction from Iran was instantaneous. So the U.S. and Israel achieved this massive tactical goal.
But you don't take out a nation's supreme leader without setting off an immediate earthquake.
Exactly. How fast was the retaliation? The tracking data shows the launch of over 300 ballistic missiles and drones.
It wasn't some localized, symbolic response.
The sky was literally lit up.
It was a massive barrage. And the breadth of the target list is what makes this so unprecedented.
It wasn't just aimed at Israel.
No, the regional defense monitors outline a sprawling counterattack. Yes, Israeli air defense installations and major cities were targeted.
And early reports indicate one Israeli civilian death so far.
That's right. But the missiles were simultaneously aimed at U.S. bases in Iraq and Syria, U.S. facilities in Jordan, and the massive U.S. Al-Udeid air base in Qatar.
They even targeted Gulf monarchies that are currently hosting U.S. forces.
Which is a huge escalation.
I'm looking at the damage reports, and it wasn't just military installations taking hits. The economic targets were heavily prioritized.
Yes, energy infrastructure in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates was targeted in this barrage.
On top of that, Yemen's Houthis immediately announced they're resuming attacks on Red Sea shipping,
directly threatening global trade windows.
It looks like a highly coordinated effort to inflict maximum pain across multiple sectors simultaneously.
And this raises an important question about the strategic shift we are witnessing right now. For decades, the geopolitical analyses note this has been a shadow war.
Right. Think back to the 2020 assassination of General Qasem Soleimani.
Or the direct, somewhat calculated exchanges between Israel and Iran back in 2024. Or the ongoing proxy battles.
But that shadow war is officially over.
It is over. We have transitioned into an unprecedented, direct, great power confrontation.
So Israel essentially gains some short-term breathing space from the nuclear threat.
By destroying those enrichment facilities.
But the brutal trade-off is they're now facing unprecedented direct ballistic missile attacks on their homeland. Here's where it gets really interesting though. When you look at the power dynamics inside Iran right now, we have to ask the crucial question.
What actually happens to a country when its supreme leader is suddenly killed?
Right. If the goal was to decapitate the regime who is actually in charge of coordinating this massive 300 missile retaliation.
Right now, an emergency succession crisis is gripping Iran. The intelligence updates explicitly state that the Revolutionary Guard, the IRGC commanders, have assumed emergency control of the state.
So there is a massive power vacuum at the very top.
At the very top of the political and religious hierarchy. The centralized civilian and religious leadership has been wiped out.
And the military apparatus simply stepped into the fill-in.
At least temporarily.
And that leads to this massive aha moment for me when I was reading through these intelligence sources.
Yeah.
The U.S. achieved its short-term objectives. They disrupted the leadership continuity. They destroyed key nuclear infrastructure.
But Iran's long-term asymmetric proxy network remains completely intact.
Yes. And for you listening, when we say asymmetric proxy network, we aren't just talking about a few ragtag militias.
Not at all.
We're talking about highly sophisticated, heavily armed groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon or the Houthis in Yemen.
Groups that act as an extension of Iran's military power across the region.
And that is precisely why this situation is so incredibly volatile.
Imagine taking the CEO and the entire board of directors out of a massive multinational corporation overnight. The regional managers, in this case these heavily armed militia groups, are suddenly left with massive budgets, vast arsenals of weapons, and absolutely zero adult supervision.
These regional Shia militias are now operating without Tehran's coordinating hand.
The centralized command structure that used to give them orders, fund them, and crucially hold them back when necessary is gone.
And the intelligence forecasts are predicting a massive, uncoordinated activation of these Iranian proxies across the entire region within 72 hours of the strikes.
Within 72 hours.
Wait, if the long-term goal of the strike is regional stability, didn't this action just guarantee the exact opposite?
Paradoxically, yes. Cutting off the head of the snake might have actually made the entire region vastly more unpredictable and dangerous.
Because these groups are heavily armed and now operating entirely autonomously, there is literally no one to negotiate with to get them to stop.
That is the terrifying reality the defense establishment is waking up to right now. You are dealing with what the State Department has long designated the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism.
But now it's operating without a central brain.
Exactly. The risk of miscalculation, of rogue commanders launching strikes that escalate the conflict even further, is exponentially higher today than it was before the decapitation strike.
Let's zoom out from the immediate region and look at the international stage. The global reactions are pouring in by the minute.
An emergency UN Security Council session was scheduled for the afternoon of March 1.
Looking at the diplomatic cables, let's map out this geopolitical chessboard, starting with Russia.
Russia's response has been swift and deeply concerning for the West. They have publicly condemned the strikes as unacceptable aggression.
Furthermore, they're heavily emphasizing the radiological risks stemming from the damaged nuclear sites at Natanz and Fordo,
using that to rally international condemnation. But what is truly critical here is that Moscow has pledged direct military technical support to Tehran.
So they're offering mediation on one hand?
But that pledge of military hardware represents a significant deepening of the Russia-Iran strategic partnership.
Which directly challenges U.S. dominance and deterrence in the Middle East.
Definitely.
And then you have China, who is watching all of this incredibly warily.
The official statements call for restraint.
But I'm looking at their economic footprints in the region, and a massive regional war is essentially their worst-case scenario.
Their primary concern is the threat this poses to their Belt and Road investments.
Yes, and it's important to understand what those investments actually are. We're talking about billions of dollars poured into regional ports, massive rail networks, and critical energy infrastructure across the Middle East.
China relies heavily on this region not just for oil, but as a crucial transit hub for global trade. They have vital economic arteries that are now sitting in an active, unpredictable war zone.
Meanwhile, Europe and NATO are scrambling to respond.
The diplomatic back channels show EU leaders desperately pushing for some kind of diplomatic off-ramp
to halt the violence before it spirals further.
But on the military side, NATO isn't waiting around. They've already begun discussions about activating their southern flank,
preparing for the very real possibility of this conflict spilling over into their immediate defensive perimeter.
Which brings us to a really nuanced part of the map, the Gulf states.
The regional analyses paint a very complex picture of their reaction.
Publicly, countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE are maintaining strict neutrality.
They have to. They're bracing for the spillover effects.
Especially since their energy infrastructure has already taken hits from the retaliation.
But quietly, behind closed doors, the diplomatic chatter indicates they are actually celebrating the severe weakening of the Iranian regime.
A regime which has been their primary geopolitical and religious rival for decades.
Now, I'm looking at the market data from Monday morning, and it is a complete bloodbath. Brent crude oil shot up 15%.
Hitting $110 a barrel almost instantly.
But it's not just the price of oil itself, it's the logistics of moving it. The maritime readouts say the Strait of Hormuz is technically still open.
But Red Sea shipping has basically flatlined.
Why would a military strike completely freeze commercial shipping if the lanes aren't physically blocked by warships?
It all comes down to the insurance markets. You cannot move a massive commercial cargo ship through a body of water without comprehensive insurance.
And because the Houthis explicitly resumed attacks on commercial vessels in retaliation?
The maritime insurers are simply withdrawing their coverage altogether. The risk of a multi-million-dollar ship being sunk by a drone is too high.
So without insurance, the ships don't sail.
The route shuts down entirely.
And while Saudi Arabia has stepped up and pledged to use their spare capacity to stabilize the oil markets, the reality on the ground is that their own energy infrastructure remains highly vulnerable.
Vulnerable to these ongoing autonomous drone and missile strikes.
When global markets opened following the weekend strikes, they opened sharply lower across the board.
The only sector that saw massive gains was defense stocks. Those absolutely soared.
Now economists are mounting serious warnings about a potential global recession.
And a massive rebound in inflation.
driven almost entirely by these spiraling energy and shipping costs.
It is a classic domino effect. A kinetic strike in the Middle East immediately becomes a tax on the global economy.
Let's bring it back to the domestic front in the United States, because the political shockwaves are just as intense. The situation in Washington is incredibly tense.
The U.S. military is essentially on the highest possible alert across the entire Middle East.
Maintaining a heightened force posture and waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Domestically, the political readouts note that these strikes directly validate the hardline approach that was emphasized in President Trump's re-election platform.
He explicitly vowed to neutralize the Iranian nuclear threat and dismantle their proxy networks.
And this weekend's action aligns exactly with that promise.
Initially, there appears to be solid bipartisan support in Washington following the classified briefings given to congressional leadership.
The sheer scale of the operation, the technical success of the strikes, and the removal of a decades-long adversary tends to rally immediate unified support.
But the unity isn't total. I'm seeing that critics are already sounding the alarm in these reports.
Warning about the massive risks of severe long-term entanglement in a broader regional war.
Because taking out the leadership is one thing.
Managing the chaotic aftermath is an entirely different and often much more costly endeavor. We've seen this play out historically.
The decapitation of a hostile regime rarely leads to immediate peace.
It usually leads to a messy, prolonged power struggle that drags outside forces deeper into the conflict.
And part of that chaotic aftermath is a massive humanitarian blind spot that we absolutely need to acknowledge.
Yes.
Beyond the estimated 500-plus civilian casualties from the initial strikes, there's a total state-imposed internet blackout across Iran right now.
This prevents any accurate, on-the-ground reporting from getting out to the rest of the world.
Furthermore, international aid organizations are currently being denied access to the affected areas.
This raises an incredibly dark and urgent question, particularly regarding the strikes on the Natanz and Fordo nuclear facilities.
The environmental and health monitors highlight that there are severe mounting concerns about potential radiological exposure.
Exposure for the civilian population living in proximity to those sites. When you use bunker-busting munitions on active uranium enrichment facilities, you risk releasing radioactive material into the atmosphere and groundwater.
And with the internet cut off and aid agencies completely blocked from entering, the international community simply does not know the extent of the environmental and human damage caused by penetrating those sites.
It's a black box right now.
Okay, let's take a breath and summarize the sheer scale of the information we have just covered, because it is a massive amount to process.
It really is.
We are looking at a highly coordinated precision decapitation strike by the U.S. and Israel that killed Iran's supreme leader.
A strike that directly followed the collapse of high-stakes nuclear talks.
We saw a massive 300-missile retaliation from Iran targeting multiple countries and critical energy sectors.
We've got global markets panicking, oil spiking to $110 a barrel.
Global shipping lanes virtually closing overnight due to insurance pullouts. And a Middle East that is standing right on the precipice of a full-scale, uncontainable regional war.
If you wanted to understand the most critical facets of this historic weekend, you are now fully caught up on the facts as we currently have them.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a completely different thought to ponder, drawing on the broader implications of what these intelligence briefings reveal.
We know that Iran's powerful proxy network is now operating without a central command. Consider what this means for the future of warfare.
If a traditional state's leadership is removed, does the threat end?
Or does it simply fracture into dozens of smaller, autonomous, and totally uncontrollable conflicts that no single nation can negotiate with or deter?
And beyond that, the U.S. and Israel struck Iran specifically to prevent them from achieving a fully realized nuclear deterrent.
Right. If the rest of the world, particularly other hostile or autocratic regimes, watch as a nation's leadership get completely wiped out, specifically because they didn't have a finished bomb to protect themselves,
does this single event just guarantee that every hostile nation on Earth will now race to build a nuclear weapon at all costs?
believing it is the only true insurance policy against regime change?
That is a profoundly chilling question, and it is exactly the kind of long-term reality we are facing as this situation continues to unfold. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Navigating an unprecedented geopolitical crisis like this isn't easy.
No, but taking the time to truly understand the facts, the history, and the mechanics behind the headlines is incredibly important. Stay curious, keep seeking out the facts, and we will be here to help you unpack whatever comes next.